Thank you for joining the Asian Impact webinar. This webinar marks the 5th anniversary of the Asian Impact webinar. Today's Asian Impact webinar will be based on Asian Development Policy Report 2025. ADPR is an annual flagship report that analyzes a key development challenge facing Asia. And this year's ADPR delved into the issue of harnessing digitalization, digital transformation for good. In other words, how can Asia leverage digital transformation for inclusive and sustainable development? To kick off the webinar, the ADPR 2025 research team leader and lead author, Dr. Shu Tian, will present the key findings of the report. Over to you, Dr. Tian.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone. It is a great honor to present to you the key findings of the 2025 Asian Development Policy Report titled Harnessing Digital Transformation for Good. Next slide, please. In this report, we highlight that rapid digital advancement creates new opportunities for inclusive and sustainable development. But if we don't manage it well, it could also exacerbate inequality and undermine environmental sustainability. Public policies are critical to address market and equity failures and also enable innovation during the digital transformation. The report suggests that digital policies should incorporate inclusion and environmental sustainability goals to harnessing digital transformation for an inclusive, resilient, and sustainable future. And such policies need to be tailored to country-specific circumstances. Next slide, please. Despite impressive progress in economic development in Asia, poverty and inequality remains a work in progress. Around 19% of the regional population can be considered poor using a $3.65 a day poverty line. And in terms of domestic inequality, population-weighted average country Gini coefficient widened by about 22% from 1990 to 2010 and remained 6% higher in 2022 compared to the 1990 level in developing Asia. On the right-hand side, the region is also highly vulnerable to extreme weather events. Our 2024 estimation shows that under a high emission scenario by 2070, the region will lose about 17% of the GDP. Riverine flooding, for example, will affect over 110 million people annually, causing $1.3 trillion damage a year. Digital technologies can promote inclusion and environmental sustainability. Let me walk you through the 5 key channels where they can make an impact. First, top right, digital technologies enhance access to information and services by breaking geographic and information barriers. They create economic opportunities, especially for vulnerable groups, via better access to finance, education, and also business networks. Second, the middle right box, digital technologies like sensors, Internet of Things, can generate real-time data and predictive analytics. This helps improve disaster responses and also climate resilience, especially critical for vulnerable groups with limited resources. Third, bottom right, digital technologies like e-commerce platforms enable innovative and scaled solutions, empowering small business and vulnerable groups to enter new markets and compete effectively. Fourth, bottom left, digital technologies boost productivity and also efficiency of resource use. From smart energy use to better factor allocation, they can drive inclusive and sustainable growth. Last, top left, digital technologies can nudge behavior changes. Digital platforms encourage sustainable choices by providing environmental information like emissions and setting eco-friendly default options, changing behaviors. Next slide, please. Despite enormous opportunities, unmanaged digital transformation risks exacerbating inequality and sustainability. First, top right, disparities in access, use, and outcomes of digital technologies can give rise to digital divide. Factors like education, income, age, risk perceptions create participation barriers, leaving vulnerable groups further behind during digital transformation. Second, bottom right, digital transformation can have employment impacts. Automation displaces some jobs. At the same time, expanded production and also new job tasks increase employment. So the net employment impact remains complex and varies across sectors and countries. Third, bottom left, weak digital governance, including cybersecurity, data privacy, misinformation, and also competition concerns, disproportionately affect vulnerable groups. Combined with limited digital literacy, these concerns or risks can erode trust in digital technologies and also undermine participation in digital transformation. Last, top left, digital transformation presents a sustainability paradox at the same time. While improving energy efficiency, it can increase energy consumption through expanded production and also behavioral responses in energy use. If not powered with clean energy sources, it could also contribute to emissions, challenging environmental sustainability. Next slide, please. Starting from this slide, I will use 3 slides to describe the progress in digitalization across the region. This slide itself shows rapid increases in internet coverage and speed. Between 2019 to 2023, fixed and mobile internet coverage grew by 17.7% and 5% respectively to serve around 2.2 to 2.3 billion people in the region in 2023, while the download speed jumped by 156% or nearly 400% respectively during the same period. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the ongoing gaps in digital connectivity and also digital skills across the region. On the left-hand side, we see that as of March 2024, large regional economies like China, India, Indonesia still have far fewer digital centers per million people, as shown in the green bars, compared to advanced economies, and even compared to peers like Brazil and Mexico. On the right-hand side, digital skills remains generally low across the region. Even in upper middle income countries like Malaysia, about 40% of people still lack basic digital skills, like texting, copy pasting, and around half of the population lacks the standard skills like using, downloading, setting up digital applications. Next slide, please. This slide shows digital divide exists both within and across regional economies. On the left-hand side, in terms of internet download speeds, rural areas, which is blue, consistently lag behind urban areas, which are red. For mobile internet, the average rural speed is about 28% slower than the urban speed. For fixed, the rural speed is 18% slower than the urban areas. On the right-hand side, the inclusive internet index from The Economist shows wide differences across the regional economies in terms of internet availability, affordability, relevance, and readiness. The largest gap is seen in affordability in developing Asia. Next slide, please. This slide and also the next slide shows some regional evidence that digital technologies can help deliver positive impacts. This slide shows digital technologies can reduce inequality and empower small business. On the left-hand side, evidence from China shows that digitalization narrows income inequality by boosting incomes, especially for poorer, less educated households and also those from the less developed regions. Increase in the city's digitalization levels leads to a 6.2% income increase on average, but this increase can be widened to 25% for households in the bottom 10% income bracket. These gains largely come from better access to jobs, business opportunities, and financial services. On the right-hand side, data from India shows that micro firms using internet and social media have over 50% of higher sales on average. Digital tools help those small firms to go global by reducing entry barriers and also transaction costs. Greater digital adoption of micro firms in India is linked to about 4% higher chance of exporting. Next slide, please. This slide shows regional evidence that digital technologies help promote environmental sustainability and also disaster resilience. On the left-hand side, evidence from the public listed companies in China shows that 1% increase in a company's digitalization level leads to a 0.6 point rise in its environmental performance. How big is this 0.6%? It's around 1% of the sample average. This improvement is largely driven by a stronger green innovation and also stronger monitoring in the company and also greater information transparency. On the right-hand side, we show that remote sensing combined with the socioeconomic data can effectively monitor and inform potential agriculture damage during tropical cyclones in Fiji. Such estimations can be made even before satellite image is available and can accelerate disaster responses. Next slide, please. Despite all those kind of benefits, this slide shows that the region's digitalization progresses faster relative to the rest of the world, but the progress on inclusion and environmental sustainability hasn't kept the same speed. The table actually reports the changes in global rankings of regional economies in terms of digitalization, proxied by Network Readiness Index, NRI, in column 3, inclusion, proxied by Inclusive Growth Index, IGI, in column 4, and environmental sustainability, proxied by Environmental Performance Index, EPI, in column 5, and also for robustness, by environmental sub-index of the IGI in column 6, the last column. So you can see the region moves faster relative to the rest of the world in digitalization, as shown in the green cells in column 3. So we have more green cells, which means we are faster relative to the rest of the world. In contrast, column 4 shows sort of mixed patterns in inclusion with a blended of green, yellow, red cells. So we are similar to the red world average in terms of the progress. However, if you see the last two columns, we see red cells seems to be a majority, which indicates that most of the regional economies progress relatively slower than the rest of the world in environmental sustainability. If we combine this observation with the regional evidence in the previous two slides, this slide actually tells us developing Asia has the potential to further leverage digitalization or digital technology to accelerate inclusive and sustainable development. Next slide, please. This report proposes a digital policy package that ties together inclusion, sustainability, and also digital transformation. The idea is to fix key market failures like underinvestment in digital infrastructure in remote area, and also underinvestment in green digital solutions, like because of the externalities are underpriced. It can also overcome equity failures to ensure everyone can participate in digital transformation and also enable innovation. 3 key actions under the digital policy package include, first, the national digital strategy that integrates inclusion and sustainability goals. Higher level national strategies will help align ministries and engage stakeholders. For example, Korea's Green IT National Strategy in 2009 already emphasized a whole of government approach of cross-government collaboration. Second, under this big national strategy, digital policies tailored to local circumstances are important. I will elaborate more in the next 2 slides. Third, engaging a broad range of stakeholders is also important. The private sector, has innovative tools to roll out inclusive and sustainability-related initiatives. Civil societies, NGOs, and local communities have the local knowledge and trust to successfully implement educational and capacity-building programs in targeted communities. International collaboration will be helpful to standardize data and trade flows, and also international organizations like ADB can bring funding and know-how to support the government with different aspects. Next slide, please. This slide actually outlines some policy examples that align inclusion and sustainability with digital technologies by instrument types. First, regulations and standards. Some examples, for example, setting the coverage obligations during spectrum allocation to expand connectivity. For example, Thailand used this, ensuring fair competition to support small business during digitalization, like India's digital competition law, and promoting green infrastructure by requiring energy efficiency and clean energy use, like a green data center standard in China, Korea, and Singapore. So that is a regulation and standard. And the next type of instrument is really related to physical incentives. For example, subsidies, tax incentives. For example, Fiji provided a tax exemption on ICT operators. Malaysia offers grants to help SMEs to adopt digital solutions like e-commerce and also marketing tools. Aside of physical incentives, the next policies could be capacity building, the skill upgrading schemes. For example, India offers free training on basic digital skills to vulnerable groups. Malaysia provides skill upgrading courses to build the digital skills for the workforce. And also market-based tools will be also helpful, like auctions to allocate spectrums, carbon pricing to promote adoption of energy efficient technologies. Last, work closely with key stakeholders. For example, India's digital public infrastructure, DPI, is a good example, scaling digital services like fintech through partnerships. Global collaboration can also help harmonize digital standard to boost the cross-border data flows and also trade. Next slide, please. However, the right policy mix really depends on each country's specific situation. One way to tailor policies, just as a demonstration, could be to look at where a country stands in terms of digitalization, inclusion, and sustainability. For example, if we use the indexes in the table in slide 11, remember the table where we have a different color of cells? If we use those indexes, we can describe a relatively high or low status of a country by comparing the index with a global median level of these indexes. Such exercise can help us to group countries into three broad categories. First, the left, the low digitalization group on the left-hand side. For example, in this low digitalization group, examples like Bangladesh, Cambodia, Kyrgyz, Mongolia, Nepal, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, among many other regional economies, their digitalization level, if you compare to global median, is below the global median. These countries need to accelerate digital transformation by making investments into digital infrastructure and also digital skills. Given limited resources, they can consider some low-cost solutions like spectrum sharing, digital infrastructure sharing, and also cloud-based solutions. It can also make smart decisions by prioritizing digital technologies to strengthen disaster resilience, because many of them actually they have relatively large agriculture sector, which is relatively vulnerable to extreme weather events. Second, high digitalization, but in terms of inclusion and sustainability, relatively low compared to the global median level in the bottom right. Yes, examples in this high digitalization and low inclusion and sustainability groups include PRC, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, among others. These countries actually can leverage their digitalization progress in terms of digital infrastructure and skills to bridge digital device and also decarbonize their digital infrastructure. For instance, China plans to power public-owned data centers fully by renewable energies by 2032. So they can further decarbonizing their existing and new digital infrastructure, and then also connect and bridge their digital device. Third group, top right, high digitalization and also high inclusion and the sustainability group. These groups, examples, Singapore and Korea, they are actually the leading countries. They have the resource and institutions to lead innovation and set good practices. Singapore, for example, they have the green standard for data centers, and they also provide subsidies for low-income seniors. So they are continuing investing to close the digital divide. At the same time, they are leading new standard and new practices. Korea's New Deal links digitalization with green and inclusive goals. Both have implemented carbon pricing because they have relatively sound institutional qualities. So here again, we wanted to emphasize that we wanted to emphasize the important role of tailored digital policies that incorporate inclusion and sustainability objectives as part of the digital policies to leverage digital transformation for an inclusive and a resilient future. But at the same time, these policies need to be considered to country-specific situations. So if you are interested to read more about the report, kindly scan the QR code, and then you can get more details about the message in this report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace, for the comprehensive presentation of ADPR 2025. Let's now move on to the panel. We have 4 excellent panelists who are highly knowledgeable about the inclusive and sustainable impact of digital transformation. So first, we have Rowena Cullen, who is a professor emeritus in information management and also an adjunct professor in the School of Government at Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. We also have Astrid Jacobsen, who is an expert on strategy, knowledge, and information and innovation at the Digital Transformation Team of the European Environment Agency. And then we have John Beirne, who is a principal economist in the Economic Research and Development Impact Department of ADB. And last but not least, we have Yoonee Jeong, who is a senior digital tech specialist in the digital sector office of ADB. By the way, all 4 experts contributed significantly to the ADPR. So if you have any questions, audience, please post your questions on the Q&A box. But let's start things off with the first round of questions that I will pose to the 4 panelists. First is a question for Rowena. You are working on research on digital policy, including digital inclusion, the digital economy, and digital governance. What are the benefits of digitalization for lower income population groups and for the local and national economy? In other words, why should countries invest in digital infrastructure? Rowena?
Thank you, Dong-Yeon. Well, the benefits of digitalization for lower income population groups can be identified at both the personal family level and also at the state level. So if you take groups such as agricultural workers, especially in more remote areas, you take women, ethnic and religious minorities, or people with disabilities, and that's an important category not to omit. They can enjoy immediate benefits from digitalization in terms of the increase of income, as Grace's presentation showed, financial services through fintech, access to government services, minor things for most countries, such as registration of vehicles, registration of a business, booking intercity or state transport and so on, and knowledge sources are benefits. But alongside these benefits to the individual, all this activity contributes to economic growth, the local economy, the regional and the national economy. And in addition, all these these groups form a pool of unutilized talent. Not only do they not enjoy their full share of human rights, they're prevented from fully participating in and contributing to the economy. And I'd like to focus a little on the role of women in this. Digital technology is one of the most effective tools we know for the empowerment of women. It's very clear through global research that when women have greater access to education, to employment, and to financial services that digitalization brings, they're empowered in the home. They are more able to bargain for their children's education and for health issues. They have higher rates of saving than men, and they use credit services better. So that enables them to set up small enterprises based on agricultural produce, local crafts, whatever they choose to develop, and they bring in greater income. And there's a study that cites in the ADB citing this that shows that rural women more able to secure off-farm employment through the use of simple digital technologies such as mobile phones. And I'd like to finish by reminding us all that reducing gender inequality is a major SDG goal for the UN. Technology can help deliver gender equality. So there's a considerable literature on this, and a considerable amount of it focuses on the negative impact of gender discrimination on economic growth. So aside from human rights, gender inequality means that half the population are not able to fully contribute to the economy. Which country could afford that? So I ask you, there are a number of good examples in the report, which I would highlight for listeners that I think, about farmers accessing market prices, enabling them to secure better returns on their produce, or fintech bringing prompter payment, easier access to loans, the women can access credit. And in the Pacific alone, where my research has taken me, all kinds of biosecurity procedures, examples in Fiji, or certification of organic produce in Vanuatu have significantly improved through enhanced digital communications, and often quite simply based on mobile technologies. So those are some examples, I think, which bring life to the points that Grace was making in the report. Thank you, Jeong.
Thank you, Rowena. Next question goes to Yoonee. In many Asian countries, policymakers clearly recognize the urgent need to accelerate digital transformation to drive growth and development. However, weak digital governments could pose a significant challenge, especially in ensuring that digital transformation is inclusive and equitable. So from your perspective, what aspects of digital governance of weak digital governance pose the most serious challenges to inclusive development in Southeast Asia and the broader region? Over to you, Yoonee.
Thank you for the question. And there are a lot of questions embedded in this, but I think one of the things the report highlights is really this analog side of digital, how critical those analog frameworks of who uses this technology, how we're using the technology, how we are enabling people to use technology versus the technology itself. There are a lot of challenges in developing countries in being able to utilize the benefits of digital transformation stemming from weak digital governance. And it takes a form of in certain cases, inadequate frameworks, especially when it comes to data governance and data protection frameworks. A lot of countries are starting to look at either enacting some of the data protection laws or updating those, but I conflicted around data, how to manage data misuse, for example, or the states need to conduct surveillance at the end of the day, their enforcement power when it comes to data protection law, for example, is limited, as well as inconsistency across different countries when you look at data residency requirements, for example, which hamper cross-border data flow and also limiting ability of businesses and countries to reap benefits of a globalized digital economy. Other examples of weak governance can be seen in the cybersecurity, which then leads to lack of resilience, cyber resilience of a lot of DMCs. We talk about promoting digital adoption and use of digital, but then if it's not paralleled by an effort to strengthen the cyber resilience, then it's often the poor, the less educated, the more vulnerable will be disproportionately affected by cyber threats. And we've seen a lot of examples throughout Asia and also cited in our report as well. But then more fundamental than the digital specific governance is really what we see often in developing countries, which is regulatory fragmentation and institutional weakness. When you talk about digital policies, it really requires a whole of government approach because digital cuts across sectors as well as different levels of government. And even within ADB, our digital sector office is fairly new, and therefore we are also trying to figure out ways to work productively with different sectors. I think it's only natural that a lot of DMCs have worked in silos and have done their digitalization initiatives in silos as well. But in order to really reap the benefits and strengthen the governance, there has to be a cross-sectoral, cross-government, cross-agency effort, which is challenging, and it's a lot harder than it sounds because it's literally redoing the plumbing or wiring of the government in a sense. It requires change of mindset, requires new levels of leadership, and even the way ADB delivers our service, it's no longer just a single sector approach, but it really requires a collaboration with different sectors and different actors as well. Because a really effective intervention should be an end-to-end where you bring best practices, help DMCs come up with a framework that fits to their context, has to be contextualized. There has to be a training or capacity building because, again, we're talking about new ways of doing things, new ways of governing and regulating, and new ways of thinking about sectors and businesses because digital business cuts across different sectors as well. And ultimately financing to be able to affect these changes effectively, right? So in short, the weak governance in DMCs are really underscored in their data governance, cybersecurity frameworks, and those can be a targeted intervention from ADB or development partners' perspective. But in order for the policy interventions to be effective, then requires more than requires interventions that's more than just digital. It really has to be a whole of government approach. So I'll stop here, Tom.
Thank you, Yoonee. The next question is for Astrid. The report highlights both potential benefits and costs of digital transformation for environmental sustainability. So in your view, what policy measures can governments adopt to encourage the development and deployment of low-emission digital technologies that reduce environmental costs? Astrid?
Thanks a lot. That's, of course, highly complex, and we're not talking about a few measures to fix a few problems. First of all, it's important to have environmental objectives and standards to drive the incentives towards deploying these measures, and also to provide a planning and investment horizon for private stakeholders. So that's number one, environmental objectives and standards. Secondly, as mentioned in the report, it's important to have to establish or policies to establish basic enablers such as connectivity, open data, capabilities, incentives, all needed for developing and deploying such solutions. And thirdly, it's important to think about specific measures in specific domains. It's not one size fits all. How to encourage and develop sustainable consumption and production measures. And the transition to sustainability is, of course, a very complex process of scaling sustainable consumption and production measures and phasing out unsustainable practices. But if we look at it from this system perspective, different measures can be deployed in different domains, like the energy system. Data and AI can help introduce larger share of renewables in the energy system from many decentralized renewable energy sources, and also to manage the demand side of increasing number of users. We can look at agriculture and cities, precision farming, smart agriculture, smart cities, which aims at managing better resource flows, waste flow, energy consumption measures with various different digital enablers, algorithms, and data models and predictions to manage all these resource flows better. And we could also, beyond those system changes, we can, there's cross-cutting measures to enhance and enable stakeholders to provide their own solutions, creating innovation spaces to help civil society and the private sector to develop their own solution and scale them. And the final point I want to make is because of the nature of digital technologies, the marginal cost of scaling is low. And that's why it's important when deploying all these measures to think about the level, regional, national, or sub-national level. Because if you develop solutions and share knowledge and make solutions available, costs are lower when deployed at a higher level, so to speak. So I think thinking about regional cooperation, national collaboration is important for the scaling and deployment, which again is very important for the cost profile, making these measures feasible. So that's the last point I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Astrid. Let me now turn to John. ADPR 2025 highlights the potentially disruptive effects of digital transformation on labor markets. So how do you assess the implications of digital transformation for inclusive development? And what measures can Asian governments take to mitigate the potentially negative impacts while maximizing the opportunities, labor market opportunities brought about by digital transformation? John?
Okay, thank you, Dong-Yoon. So in the report, we talk about the impacts of digital transformation on the labor market, on employment, as was mentioned in the presentation as well. And, you know, reflecting the literature, which is already evolving in this area, we find that there are different effects depending on the skills of the workers. And the net effect on employment would also be affected as a result of that. So, for example, where workers will be lower skilled and more involved in more routine tasks. We may see some more vulnerability to so-called displacement effects, whereas where skills will be higher, there could be more scope for increased productivity, but these workers would still need to continually adapt in terms of how they are adapting to the transformation in digitalization and utilizing those improvements in their work. So, you know, the key question is how do we basically ensure that opportunities brought by AI, opportunities brought by digitalization, digital transformation are accessible to everybody, regardless of the nature of the work, and that the risks don't essentially, you know, disproportionately affect one more than the other. As I said, you know, it's necessary to address both workers who may be involved in more mundane tasks, lower skilled workers, and those that would be more involved in higher skilled occupations. And I think you know, government has a key role to play in both respects. So one key aspect from the policy side would be to invest further in education and skills development, upgrading of skills, upskilling programs to enable both low-skilled and high-skilled workers to adapt effectively to the digital economy. This can include things like improving affordable access to digital literacy, technical training, even softer skills on problem solving, creativity, for example. Another area of policy would be on the digital inclusion side. So this would include, for example, ensuring that remote areas, rural areas, or other underserved areas would be accessible in terms of technology. So infrastructure would be important in that regard. Investment in infrastructure, making the internet affordable, the provision of digital training centers, and so on. So in other words, promoting digital inclusion to balance out some of these potential negative net effects on employment. Another area would be on creating more inclusive economic policies more broadly. So this would be aimed at, for example, helping those who may be displaced by digital transformation to essentially weather that storm. This would include, for example, measures around social safety nets to address that. And I think another area worth considering would be on AI governance. So to ensure that labor laws and so on are in place that ensure transparency with regard to AI. And all of these factors considered together can help to essentially mitigate the potential inequality that could come from digital transformation. So as you can see, there's a key role for policy action in addressing the employment effects in respect of both lower skilled workers and higher skilled workers. And we cover many of these issues and policy implications in the report. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Now let me turn to some questions from the audience. Perhaps you can take this, Astrid. The question is this: does the report address concerns related to the increasing greenhouse gas footprint due to greater use of AI? Astrid?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the report is very clear on the focus on the twin transition to use digital technologies to lower emissions and improve the environment, but also a very strong focus on mitigating the greenhouse gases from digital itself. And I think this is very important. I think there's a lot of focus in the report and elsewhere, and I think this challenge hasn't become smaller with more wide uptake of AI, which has a very different greenhouse gas footprint than regular digital technologies, something like 20 times or something But we also know that there are different footprints from different types of AI algorithms. So it's very important to consider this and to develop measures. I think we are still in the early days of this huge AI uptake, and it's important to develop measures. And I think everyone is struggling to consider what to do the best way at the same time as leveraging the benefits. But I think it's a very clear message in the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Astrid. Another question from the audience. The question is this: is it counterproductive for developing countries to pursue digitalization without having proper regulatory frameworks in place? To what extent should digitalization be delayed until such frameworks exist? So I think maybe Rowena, can you take this question?
Yes, certainly. I have seen in many countries in my research things going backwards and forwards. I don't believe you can hold up this technology. I don't think it's fair or reasonable to hold up this technology. I think it all comes back to having a really strong national strategy and policy that actually pursues both demand side and supply side approaches to universal access. And, you know, my own country, New Zealand, is not exempt from this, but there needs to be the political will. Governments should stop seeking for financial gain from owning a telecommunications company, moderate their markets through all the tools that governments have to moderate markets, and put in place really strong policies that are not swept aside by an incoming government. It's the same with, I think, with the sustainability issues, which sometimes become a political football. But you need to manage through price regulation, spectrum allocation and assignment licensing, and have a policy for universal services and access, using new technologies such as the Starlink service, which has made a dramatic improvement in access to technology across the Pacific. But I don't believe that you could hold back the technology. The responsibility for government is to manage it through good policy. Thank you, Dong-Yeon.
Thanks, Rowena, for answering this question.
Let me now turn to a question for all the panelists. A question asks, how can this low digitalization, low sustainability countries, right, move up higher, and what is the potential role of a high digitalization, high sustainability countries in helping these lower level countries advance? Can you start? Can you first take it, Grace, please?
Okay, thanks, Tom. Thanks for this question, very relevant. So for those countries which is relatively below the world average levels, as the report indicates, I think they still need to continue invest in digital infrastructure and build the needed digital skills so that people can use the digital technologies and then access and use the digital infrastructure you build. So that is the basics. And then at the same time, I think those are high digital and high inclusion and sustainable countries, when they have innovative solutions, like some cost-effective solutions like cloud-based solutions, I think via knowledge transfer, international collaboration. So those kind of knowledge and then good practices can be gradually passed and learned by those low digitalization companies, which enables them actually to leapfrog from what they have, and then they can directly use relatively more advanced technologies without throwing the generation by generation of technologies. So on this front, I think international collaboration and also capacity building, and also knowledge transfer is very important. That is also where in ADB we found a good role to play to support knowledge transfer, and then also support the low digitalization groups to continue to make investment in infrastructure, skills, and also needed policy capacities. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, Grace. Thank you so much. Now, let me turn to a question for John. One key message of the report, right, is that the well-designed policies can steer digital transformation toward inclusive and sustainable development outcomes. In other words, that the well-designed policies can align digital transformation with inclusive and sustainable development. But what is the role of the private sector in driving inclusive and sustainable development, in your view? John?
Yes, thank you, Dong. This is a very good question. I think, one of the issues we highlight in the report is to effectively reap the benefits of digital transformation. It's necessary to engage a wide set of stakeholders, and one of those is the private sector. The government has a key role to play in creating an effective enabling environment for digital transformation, and this can help to stimulate greater levels of private sector activity and achieve greater overall gains in terms of the impacts of digitalization, digital transformation on the economy. So, issues around infrastructural improvements, improving affordable broadband, data centers, and so on can be very helpful in leveraging greater levels of private sector activity, which is, of course, beneficial as well for the economy more broadly. I think the government can also be helpful in this regard by setting clear strategic priorities, and also this can help to improve the extent of inclusion, effectively reduce the risk of inequality that could come from digital transformation. Going forward. And also, of course, there's the role of government in fostering public-private partnerships. And when these are targeted effectively, the results can be beneficial for both the government, of course, and for the private sector, which are usually, of course, profit oriented. So I think, what we highlight, as I said, is engaging a broad set of stakeholders in the policy package on digital transformation, and there's a key role for involving the private sector in that, in order to magnify greater impacts and leverage greater effects from digital transformation. Stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Let me now give a question for Yoonee. Of course, cybersecurity is absolutely important, right, for the digital transformation, but poor countries, especially lower income countries, do not often have the institutional capacity, right, to ensure adequate cybersecurity. So what can be done, and is ADB helping lower income countries in the area of cybersecurity? Yoonee?
Thank you, Tom. Cybersecurity is an absolute requirement, underpinning prerequisite in digital infrastructure. Even the way our digital sector office is organized, the foundational layers include digital infrastructure, policy regulations, and cybersecurity, recognizing the increasing vulnerability of our DMCs as more and more countries and businesses and lives are becoming digitalized. We recognizing this need, we have started technical assistance that's starting with practical toolkits for our governments to use in strengthening their resilience. And we are hoping to get more funding and financing to help countries come up with institutional setting. And good thing about cybersecurity is that cyber vulnerability is not bound within a country. Therefore, there are a lot of international standards, international institutions and arrangements, such such as ASEAN CERT, that our developing member countries can look to strengthen their standards and their institutional capacity. So our job is to really help DMCs get to those standards and implement those. So early stage, but yes, we are starting our work in cybersecurity.
Thank you, Yoonee. We have about 3 minutes left. So very briefly, Rowena, what, in your opinion, what policies are needed to ensure that disadvantaged groups can take up the opportunities offered by digitalization? Of course, there are several policy and actions, but in your opinion, what are the most important ones?
Well, I think and this partly answers Daryl's question, that working with low-income communities and so on, it's really important to work with some of the stakeholders that Grace referred to in the presentation, that building trust, working with community groups and elderly people, and using the structures which are there, funding those to help the transition, because along with the barriers of technology and cost, the barriers for uptake remain with the people. And I think that those sorts of policies are the things that developing countries can focus more on, working with communities, working in the education system, working with religious groups to help access, to help build trust, to help build the skills and help empower the people that they serve.
Thank you so much. By the way, the presentations and webinar recording will be available soon at the Asian Impact webinar page. Before we close today's seminar, we would like to invite you to join our next Asian Impact webinar, which will be on mobilizing private capital for climate action, to be held at 10 to 11 a.m. Manila time on 24 July via Zoom. And also, thank you everyone for joining us in this Asian Impact webinar on its 5th anniversary. This has been a very impactful webinar series. Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.